Here's 5 top tips to pass your first interview. So you've got your first interview coming up and you're crazy nervous. You've never done anything like this before, you're not really sure what to expect, and you're not sure how to prepare. The internet is absolutely crammed full of information about interviews. You don't know what's right, what's wrong, and you found this video. Well, you're in luck, because for the past 10 years, I prepared people for interviews all the way from apprentices to C-level executives. And here's my 5 big tips for getting you prepared for your interview. Stick around for tip number 5, which I firmly believe is probably the most important tip that I can give you. But before I get started with the tips, I want to share with you what an interviewer is really looking for, because that's kind of the important question, right? When we sit down in front of another person, whether that be face to face, over the phone, or through a video screen, we're kind of thinking, well, what is it that you're looking for from me? It's actually quite simple. I've sat on the other side of the table and I've interviewed plenty of members of staff as well. And really, all an interviewer is looking for is just somebody who they believe, with a reasonable level of confidence, can do the job and is not going to materially damage the company or the team. Now, I'll explain. Sometimes you can find somebody who's going to do the job, but they're just not very easy to get on with, and you feel like they're not really going to bond with the team. I think one of the things that really gets missed is what's important as a person when you're going into a company to work with other people who you may not have met before, who are all different ages, different sexes, different cultures, different value systems, in a business that has a certain set of rules and systems that you need to follow. And one of the kind of biggest things is that they're easy to get on with. They're teachable, they're coachable, they're relatable, they're reasonably friendly, they have the ability to communicate, they can be adaptable and flexible. One of the most common mistakes that I see with people in their first time interviews is that they're too stiff because they're full of fear, and they come across as arrogant or overconfident. So an interviewer is really just looking for somebody who can do the job to a reasonable level of confidence, because they need to fulfill that job soon. Companies don't interview for jobs unless they're huge, i.e. for a graduate scheme. They're going to be interviewing for a job because they have a pressing demand for somebody today. So if they can find somebody with a reasonable level of confidence that they believe can do the job, they're highly likely to give that person an opportunity, unless they meet somebody who is better than that person that they are interviewing. So that's a really short summary of what your interviewer is going to be looking for. So let's start off running through the 5 biggest tips. Tip number 1, learn how to introduce yourself. Now you can find a personal introduction worksheet and example, along with I think 14 other free downloads, down in the description below. Learning to introduce yourself is the first place that I start with clients if they're working with me for a chunk of sessions to get better at interviews. It is such a crucial skill, because the interviewer probably won't know anything about you. They may have looked at your CV really quickly, they're going about their day, you are more of an inconvenience to them, more than likely, because they're having to fit you in alongside the other work that they're already doing. Imagine, you're having a really busy day, and then your mum, your dad, your partner goes, oh, one other thing, do you mind going and do this, this and this? And you're like, yeah, okay, fine. But you're feeling hassled as you're doing that, because you're already busy enough as it is and you have your own priorities. So being able to introduce yourself really has 2 key elements to it. Number 1, it's a really good way for you to start learning how to practice speaking out loud and just selling yourself. And also number 2, a really good personal introduction can sway an interview very quickly. And what you're looking to do is basically say, this is what I'm doing now. This is what I've done in the past, maybe your last job, your last academic experience, maybe you're at secondary school watching this video and just saying, well, I'm currently studying maths, physics and chemistry at A-levels at this school, blah, blah, blah. Then you talk about what you would like to do, so why you want to do the job, just in brief, or work at that company. And then you cover your work experience, your extracurricular activities, and finally your skills and interests. And you want to do all of that within about 2 minutes. Now, this is something that you can start to do today. Even if you're just worried about getting your first interview, you can start practicing your personal introduction. So you feel like even if the whole rest of the interview you haven't prepared for, you can nail that personal introduction. You can tell anybody about yourself. Now, this is also really good. Just say randomly through serendipity, you meet somebody who has a job or is looking to hire somebody, and they're like, oh, okay, cool, tell me about yourself. So, what do you do? And then if you can really kind of pitch yourself there and then, that gives you a massively increased chance of success when it comes to getting an interview. A key thing to remember from this tip is that it's about confidence and not competence. A lot of people, particularly if you're younger, if you have a limited amount of experience, come at it thinking, well, I'm not really that competent, I don't have that much experience. Of course you don't have experience, you're young. But if you're confident, that's enough. We all have that friend, that person that we know that just completely BS's their way through life, and they don't really know what they're talking about, but they just come across as so confident. You can't help but just believe them, even though when you sit back and think to yourself, you're like, I don't think half of what she said was true, right? So learn how to give a really good personal introduction. Tip number 2. Now, this is a really common mistake, and a lot of recruiters will see this, HR, just do your homework. A lot of people will go into interviews and will have done no homework. The amount of times that I've interviewed people, whether that be a mock interview for lots of different Fortune 500 companies, or that be an interview for my company or a company that I was helping to run at the time, and just say, why do you want to work for this company? And they just give you some really lame answer like, well, I really want to work for this company because it's well known and it's really big and blah, blah, blah. And I just know straight away you haven't done your homework. You can't even be bothered to do your research. I'm having to sit here and spend half an hour with you that I could be doing something else, and you can't even be bothered to just go on the website and do a little bit of research. And this was something that came up in a recent video that I made when I outlined the top 10 mistakes as shared by senior recruiters at Morgan Stanley, which is a large US investment bank. And research was the #1 mistake that people made. Research the company and research the job. Because if you know the job and you know the job description, you actually can, #1, give the interviewer with a reasonable level of confidence that you understand what you're going to do. Again, this may surprise you, but I've interviewed people who don't even know what sort of job that they're going to be doing, which is fine if it's just an initial screening call, say from HR. But if I'm taking the time to sit down with you and you don't really understand what the job is about because you haven't bothered to read the job description, I'm just going to pass. Because something that I do feel is true and has been, I would say to a certain extent, undermined, particularly by tech and all this drawing our attention, is how you do anything is probably how you do everything. So if you can't be bothered to do your research, you come across as arrogant or overconfident, and you're basically trying to bluff me and have done absolutely no prep at all, that's how you're going to approach your work. That's how you're going to deal with a client. That's how you're going to be executing on a new project. I don't want that in my team, and I don't want that in my business, because I just have enough experience to know that that's probably true, and I'm not going to take a chance on you, because the sunk cost of an owner, a manager, a director, a partner, and so on and so forth, investing weeks, months of time into you just isn't worth it. They want that reasonable level of confidence that you will be successful and you have the characteristics determinant to be a success in that job. Whether you're delivering pizzas, you're going to be a graduate auditor, whatever it is that you're going to do, that is absolutely key. So do not skimp on research. Tip number 3, match your skills. So again, if this is your first interview and say you've never had a job before, or you've done a limited amount of service-based jobs, like my first job was making burgers at KFC. I made the burgers rather than work on the till because I was too shy to work on the till. So I was the only person who spoke good English who made the burgers at KFC in Blue Water, if you know Ken. So if you look through the job description, you can already predict what questions they're going to ask you, and you can begin to answer in the interviewer's mind the things that they're looking to tick off of their checklist. Now, sometimes, though I don't really look at LinkedIn very much, I'll have posts where people go, this is ridiculous, they're saying that they need these 20 things for this job, this is outrageous. They intrinsically demonstrate they don't understand writing job descriptions. So when people write job descriptions, it's almost like a wish list. So say, for example, you're going, well, these are all the things that I'd like to have, or this is my bucket list. A lot of times, and I'll admit, people could be better at writing job descriptions, but this is the way to treat them. So somebody is just going to sit there, a manager who's already hassled because they need a member of staff, and go, well, here's the 20 things I'd like them to do. But realistically, if they can do half of those things, that's amazing. And bare minimum, I need them to do these 5 things. So when you're looking through the job description, you can already say, well, I know how to do this, and I've got experience doing this. And actually, I have this skill because I had to do that in a college assignment that I needed to do, or on volunteering, or when I was captain of the rugby team or the football team. It doesn't matter that you don't have experience. All of this stuff like leadership, communication, interpersonal skills, flexibility, adaptability, resolving conflict, working under pressure, and so on and so forth. These are all skills that you can say that you have learned from being in secondary school, from doing a volunteering project, from being a member of your sports club, from being part of a society, whatever it is. If you know the skill, then probably as you're thinking about it, the first thing that pops into your head is the example that you want to use. So this has 2 benefits. Number one, as the interviewer's listening to you, they're like, okay, yeah, tick, he knows how to make burgers. Tick, he can get to Dartford. Tick, and so on and so forth. And also, you kind of know what questions they're going to ask you. If you find a job description for the job that you're going to interview for is really not very helpful, like it's very short or it's very salesy, then just take the title of the job, put it into Google, look for, business development executive vacancies, just go and find a job description from another company, another job advert, and you'll find some explanation from that. Or you could use a website like Prospects. Tip number 4, be yourself. Now, one thing that I always say to clients before they go into an experience that they've never gone through before is I just say to them, this is just practice. If you've never done this before, don't be too hard on yourself. And by being yourself, I just mean allow your personality to come through. Be honest, don't be afraid to just kind of say, well, I'm not really sure about this, or actually, if I'm being really honest with you, people who are actually reasonably genuine are much easier to get on with, much easier to identify with. And if that person doesn't identify with you, then maybe that wasn't going to be the right job for you. And by being yourself, you're not going to be sitting there obsessing, thinking about what should I say that will make you like me or make you want to give me a job. And generally it forces people to come really boring, really rigid, to talk too quickly, to get very anxious, they start to sweat, they get really fidgety. And just say, look, just be yourself, based upon the first 3 tips. So you will have already done your research, you already know about the company, about the job, how to introduce yourself. So you're pretty well prepared. Somebody's going to be watching this going, well, what do you mean just be myself? I'm actually really anxious. You'll be less anxious if you've done all your preparation. And importantly, if you've done tip number 5, which is quite simply practice. Now, the amount of times that I've sat there with people, and people have paid me a lot of money to prepare them for interviews because they have been unsuccessful in their last interview or last couple of interviews. And I'll ask them, one of the first questions I'll say is, cool, how much have you practiced? And they'll go, oh, I haven't really practiced. And I'm thinking, right, so you're upset that you didn't pass a test and you didn't revise and you didn't go for any past papers, but you're upset that you failed. Could you think of a reason why you failed? Now, if I frame that as a test, it seems really obvious, right? You'd go through your notes, you'd summarize your notes, you do your revision, you do practice papers. Same thing for interviews. And when I mean practice, I don't mean sitting there and reading your scripts or mumbling it under your breath. I mean practicing it in the medium with which your interview is going to happen. Your practice should be as realistic as possible. So if it's going to be via video, practice making videos. On the phone, practice doing audio notes. Face to face, get somebody to help you. Randomize the questions. Try to recall the information. Try not to read from your scripts. Practice is undoubtedly the most important thing that you can do. And in the whole kind of arc of preparing for an interview, this should be at least 50% of your time. If you dedicate 50% of your prep time to just practicing, answering random questions, practicing in front of the mirror, practicing with your mum and dad, with your friends, boyfriend, girlfriend, whoever it is, you will be much more likely to be successful because you've already done it 3 times, 6 times, 9 times, 10 times. That's probably the most important tip that I can give you. And it's incredibly obvious, but you'd be amazed how few people do this. Guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video. I just fancy doing something a little bit different today. If you enjoyed it, drop me a like, drop me a comment down below, and I'll make some more videos like this, and let me know what other videos like this you'd want me to do. Good luck.